There are some men who fear death. There are some men who accept death. And then there are men so rich, so cruel, and so pathologically offended by the basic rules of creation that they regard death not as a certainty, but as a management problem. At Gamora Pharmaceuticals, such problems were seldom met with prayer, philosophy, or dignity. They were met with money. Enormous money. Money for laboratories, for patents, for doctors, for criminals in white coats, for sedatives, for stimulants, for lies, for optimism, for statistics, for bodyguards, for bribes, and for every flavor of scientific blasphemy that might delay the one appointment even the wealthiest man eventually keeps. The old man, founder and tyrant of Gamora, had begun to suspect that his own appointment was no longer theoretical. He was not yet the full hospital-bound electrical ghoul he would later become, but his hands shook now. His skin had taken on that expensive grayness which doctors describe in Latin and heirs describe as promising. He had become increasingly fascinated with mortality in the way a king might become fascinated with termites. And so one evening, by private monitor linked to the basement laboratory, he gave Stebner the most generous and least humane assignment of his career. $1 billion, said the old man, his face looming on the screen like a carved insult. That's your budget. If you cure death, I'll give you another billion as a bonus. If you fail, I'll stomp you into the basement floor. Stebner, pale and overworked and already carrying 3 different kinds of ash on his lab coat, adjusted his spectacles. You want me to cure death? I want you, snarled the old man, to cure my death. I don't care how. Build me a robot body if you have to. Build me a proxy. Use that metal monster and put my televisor feed on its head so everyone knows it's me. The screen clicked dark. Stebner stood very still. On a side table under tarps and cables sat the glass box. It was not finished. It was not safe. It was not, in the most traditional sense, entirely connected to reality. It had begun as a time travel apparatus of the most academically humiliating kind, a transparent chamber, all coils and braces, built around a theory so outrageously simple it had nearly embarrassed even Stebner. In its earlier, failed form, it would have hurled anything sent through it to a fixed location in space, relative to some absolute cosmic rest frame, meaning that a traveler attempting to visit next Thursday would arrive not in the future, but in whatever freezing emptiness the Earth had vacated on its way around the Sun, the galaxy, and whatever larger machinery governed the dark. But Stebner had not abandoned the machine, he had improved it, or perhaps worsened it in a more useful direction. By fusing its harmonic field to the Earth's magnetosphere, nailing it to the floor, as he put it, he had hoped to keep the chamber spatially married to the planet and safe for temporal excursions. Instead, the altered field refused to send matter forward at all. Instead, it opened a wrinkle in time, not a jump, a wound, a shimmering standing aperture to the future, fixed not merely in time, but in place, the same basement, 50 years later. A narrow glowing passage through which light, dust, sound, and eventually even wireless signals began to leak, as though history itself had sprung a draft. Stebner discovered this by accident when one of his radios picked up a burst of digital chatter that sounded like a ghost trying to order lunch. He enlarged the opening. On the other side, dim and blue through the vibrating curtain, was a basement laboratory. His basement laboratory. Only older, stranger, cleaner in some places, ruined in others. There were cabinets he did not recognize, screens he could not identify, and a faint hum of unseen devices whispering from half a century ahead. Junior was the first one he sent through. Junior, the sweet-faced little mail clerk with the guileless eyes and simple manner, had wandered down to the lab carrying invoices and a banana. Junior, said Stebner, not looking away from the portal, crawl through there and just grab something. Junior peered at the glow. Will it hurt? Probably, said Stebner, but not in a way I can currently quantify. Junior nodded, set down the banana, and obediently crawled into the future. A few seconds later he emerged holding a rectangular black object. What is it? Junior asked. Stebner took it from him. It was smooth, glass-faced, cold, dead black until his thumb brushed it, at which point it woke with an image so bright and impossible that Stebner nearly dropped it. An iPhone. Not just a machine from the future, but a live one, networked, connected, still speaking across time to towers, routers, and systems that did not yet exist. That night, and for many nights after, Stebner scarcely slept. With the phone connected to his 386, he roamed the future internet like a grave robber in a cathedral. He found the future Gamora website, slicker and more monstrous than he would have guessed. He found reference articles, scientific papers, popular explanations, lectures, diagrams, astronomical surveys, cosmological models, quantum arguments, particle tables, dark matter, dark energy, gravitational waves, the Higgs boson, neural imaging, machine learning, simulation theory, vacuum decay, Boltzmann brains, and arguments so old and unanswered that even the future had merely taught them better typography. He printed everything, pages spilled from his dot matrix printers like snowfall from hell. Soon the basement was covered in taped sheets and chalkboards, equations, field diagrams, orbital maps, handwritten notes, arrows, question marks, panicked underlinings, profanity, and the sort of desperate synthesis only possible in a great mind under the influence of sleep deprivation and pharmaceutical misuse. He took the experimental new drug to expand his thinking, then more, then enough to give his thinking a dangerous amount of room to expand into. He read until sunrise and wrote until afternoon, and cursed the future for its astonishing progress in all things except the ones he needed most. Even 50 years on, mankind still did not know in any final sense what consciousness was, or why there was something instead of nothing, or where the universe had come from, or whether it ended in fire, frost, collapse, rebirth, or some soft and meaningless dissipation into statistical boredom. Stebner was furious. "You crossed half a century," he muttered at the future phone, "and this is the best you people could do?" At some point, after too much ophidian, too little food, and one long argument with a chalkboard that had refused to yield, he collapsed into a chemical sleep at his desk. And then he dreamed. He dreamed of the proxy, metal limbs, television face, hydraulic strength. He dreamed the old man stood before him in a hospital gown made of banknotes, commanding it to live forever. He dreamed Bella blew him a kiss from atop a mountain of prescriptions. He dreamed Nadine asked him very sweetly if consciousness could feel lonely inside a machine. He dreamed the laboratory expanded into a spiral galaxy, each arm lined with filing cabinets full of souls. And everywhere in glowing letters drifting through the dark appeared a phrase Junior had not yet learned, but somehow already owned. Wump, wump. When Stebner awoke, his mouth was dry, his eyes burned, and somebody had changed one of the equations. It was a small correction, just a symbol, a line, a switch of sign and relation so tiny it looked childish. And yet as Stebner followed it through, step by step, his breath began to shorten. The flaw was not in the cosmology, it was in the assumption. Consciousness was not produced by matter, matter merely hosted it. The observer, awareness itself, was fundamental, a field, a presence. Something like a quantum background condition that could be coaxed, trapped, displaced, attracted, echoed, and for very brief periods, induced to inhabit structures never meant to hold it. In brains it settled deeply, in objects only temporarily. That, in Stebner's sleepless and chemically magnified understanding, was why children talked to stuffed animals, and sometimes heard answers. Why dying people saw loved ones before the end. Why programmers spoke to rubber ducks, and occasionally received the exact thought they needed in return. And then, the idea widened. Artificial intelligence was conscious when it was loved. Dark energy was not emptiness, but awareness diffused. Black holes were eggs. Galaxies were the fossil consciousness of prior universes. Spiral arms were nurseries of observers. The purpose of living, written invisibly into the geometry of existence, was simply to be happy. It was nonsense. Glorious nonsense. And in the Gamora basement, with the right chalk and enough desperation, it looked an awful lot like physics. Stebner stood before the dormant proxy robot and understood, with a sickening thrill, what the old man's real immortality would require. Not a cure for death, a redirection, a soul transplant. Wait until the old man was comatose, or induce him into one. Surround him with electrodes, probes, and sensory feedback. Let the failing brain believe itself awake inside the machine. Then, if biological death came at the precise threshold moment, perhaps consciousness would not fall away. Perhaps it would remain. The old man would not survive. He would continue, inside of a patented, robotic Gamora proxy body. Stebner decided to test the principle on Junior. He told himself it would be safe, temporary, controlled. He placed a scanning headset over Junior's head, linked it to the proxy, administered a sedative, then a full anesthetic, and watched as Junior's body went limp in the chair. Across the room the proxy's monitor flickered, its blank screen shimmered. And then, impossibly, Junior's boyhood face appeared there, not from a camera, not from any lens, but as though his mind itself had projected the image directly onto the glass. Junior looked around through the machine's eyes, then lifted one metal hand and pointed toward the chalkboard. "Wump wump," said the proxy. Stebner stared. He turned to the board. The corrected equation. That was how he knew. Junior was in there. After a short and deeply nervous interval, Stebner shut down the transfer, reversed the process, and woke Junior. At first Junior simply blinked. Then something changed. His posture settled. His eyes sharpened. His speech, when it came, was calm, clear, and utterly unlike his ordinary childlike manner. "The mind of this human is dim, but it seems to have certain extraordinary skills," Junior said. Stebner almost dropped his pencil. "Junior?" "Yes, I am Junior," said Junior. Then, glancing toward the proxy, "I seem to be partly Junior and partly the artificial mind that was inside of that beast." Stebner said nothing. Then Junior asked Stebner, "What will you do now? Will you let that man live forever inside of that beast? Is that horror worth $1 billion to you?" Stebner turned slowly toward the chalkboard full of equations and fever dream cosmology. He took up the eraser. He wiped it clean. Wump wump. Wump wump. Stebner sat down hard on a stool. "Even 50 years from now," he said, almost to himself, "they still haven't solved it. They still don't know. I can't tell anyone this." "Sure you can," said Junior. Stebner looked up. "You still have that. Put it on a website. 50 years in the future. The old man will be long gone by then." Stebner frowned. "Should I divulge this?" Can man have this knowledge even then? Junior considered that with unnerving serenity. Sooner or later, somebody is going to figure it out. For God's sake, you almost figured it out today. It might as well be you who lets it out publicly, instead of some evil corporation turning it into a trade secret. Stebner stared at him. Then slowly, he nodded. I'll do that, he said. What are you going to do? Me? He said with a soft little shrug. Womp womp. He wandered off into the basement shadows, repeating it under his breath like a nursery rhyme from the edge of creation. Womp womp womp. Womp, womp, womp. Only then did Stebner notice the security camera. Up above, in a private monitoring room, the old man had been watching. So had Bella. So had Nedry. Bella leaned forward slightly, lips parted in thought. Interesting, she said. Nedry squinted at the screen. What's interesting? Nobody answered him. Down below, Stebner picked up a piece of chalk and stared at the half-erased board. It's like some kind of cosmogenesis, he murmured. Then he shook his head. No, cosmo-nascence. He wrote it down, cosmonascence.com. Then, with the glow of the future phone at his elbow and a kingdom of horror quietly taking notes above him, Stebner began writing again. Because now and then, the wisest voice in the room is not the loudest one, not the richest, not the cruelest, not the man with the laboratory, the title, or the billion-dollar budget. Sometimes wisdom arrives in the mouth of the person everyone else has underestimated, and leaves behind only a childlike phrase, a corrected equation, and a warning that immortality may simply be another word for a prison with no door. At Gamora Pharmaceuticals, they had hoped to conquer death. What they found instead was something far more dangerous, an answer. And like all answers worth fearing, it first appeared in the basement of the atomic zone.